S. Park. This video is called Factor by Grouping. Now, factor by grouping is very similar to common factoring. In fact, it includes common factoring. You just kind of common factor twice. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to write an expression that we will factor using grouping. Factor by grouping is for things that are bigger than trinomials, so they have more than 3 terms. And we've already seen common factoring when you try to find the GCF, or greatest common factor, of an expression and then write it as a product, with the GCF being one of the factors. So I'm going to give you an expression that has 4 terms. So I'm going to go x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 10. First thing we should always do is look to see if there is a common factor. There is no common factor right now. Okay, so what we'll do now is we're going to group these terms 2 and 2. So I'm going to group them like this. I'm not going to put brackets or anything to group them. I'm just going to make a little symbol underneath that says I'm just going to look at them in pairs. What we do now is we look for common factor in each of the pairs. So if you look at the first 2 terms, x cubed minus 2x squared, there is a common factor. The GCF is actually x squared. And so if I factor x squared out of this expression, I'm left with, so x cubed divided by the common factor gives me x, and negative 2x squared divided by the common factor gives me negative 2. So I factored x squared out of the first bracket. And now I'm going to take the first part of the expression. Now I'll take the second part of the expression and look for a common factor. Oh, I see one, it's a 5. So I'm going to factor out a 5, and I'm going to be left with x plus 2. And I'm going to notice that this x plus 2 and this x plus 2 are the same. Yay! Okay, they're the same, which means that the greatest common factor of the entire expression is this bracket x minus 2. Right? The x minus 2 appears in both sides, in both parts of the expression, so therefore it is a common factor, and it is the greatest common factor. So when we have a greatest common factor, we write it in the front. We write it as something times something, where the common factor is was the first factor. So now we're going to look at what's left. If I take the first part of the expression and divide that by my common factor, so x squared times x minus 2 divided by the x minus 2, it leaves me with x squared. And if I do the same thing with the other part, 5 times x minus 2 divided by x minus 2, that leaves me with a plus 5. And now I have an expression that is factored. Okay, and that is factor by grouping. So this is an example. Let's do one more example. Factor by grouping. Okay, so another example will look like 6n cubed plus 3n squared plus 8n plus 4. Okay, remember it's more than 3 terms. All right, and so here I'm going to look at grouping these 2 and 2. In the first part of the expression, I'm looking for a common factor, so I see 3 is common to both terms. And for the n's, I see n squared is common to both terms. I'm going to factor that out. I'm going to be left with 2n plus 1. You can kind of check in your head that if you multiply this back out, if you expand this back out, you get the same as what's above. And over here, I'm going to factor out a 4. And I'm also going to get 2n plus 1. And I'm going to be very happy because they're the same, right? The fact that they're the same means that I'm going to use them as the GCF. So greatest common factor is now 2n plus 1. So I'm going to write 2n plus 1 at the front. And then I'm going to be left with 3n squared times 2n plus 1 divided by 2n plus 1 is 3n squared. 4 times 2n plus 1 divided by 2n plus 1 is 4. And that's it. I'm done. I have factored by grouping. All right. Now, sometimes we have to be careful because sometimes there is a common factor as well as stuff to do by grouping. So for my last example, I'm going to pick an expression that can be has a common factor, and we should look for it first. So 20x squared plus 30x minus 4xy minus 6y. The first thing we should always do when we do any kind of factoring is look for a common factor. It's got 4 terms. I know I'm going to be doing factor by grouping, but before I do anything, let's take out the common factor because that will help to make all the numbers smaller in the bracket inside. The common factor here is 2. If I look at x's, the last term doesn't have x, so I can't use it as a common factor. The y's, we don't have y's in all the terms, so that's not a common factor, so just 2. Factor it out, I get 10x squared plus 15x minus 2xy minus 3y. I'm going to leave that 2 sitting outside, and I'm going to deal with the stuff on the inside. So I'm going to take this pair and this pair separately. Okay, and a common factor the first pair. So I see there's going to be a common factor of 5 and also x. And because I'm going to be doing factoring again, I'm going to have a bracket inside a bracket. So I will change this bracket to a square bracket. Let me make it a little bit nicer than that. I'm going to change it to a square bracket so I can have a bracket inside a bracket. So common factor, the first part is a 5 and also x, and I'm left with 2x plus 3. From the second part, the common factor is y, but because I have a negative, we always like to factor out the negative as well as the y, because then it leaves us with only positive, with a bracket that starts with something positive, which is a little easier to work with. So if I factor out negative y, I have negative 2xy divided by negative y, that is negative 2x. And negative 3y divided by negative y is positive 3. Sorry, I made a mistake. Of course, it's not negative 2x, just positive 2x. Right? Negative 2xy divided by negative y is just positive 2x. And we'll close the bracket. My 2 stays outside. Okay, and now inside the bracket, I see, oh look, there's 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 3. They are in common. Those are my GCF. So I'm going to write those up front. I'm going to open the new bracket. The first part of the expression divided by 2x plus 3 is 5x. The second part of the expression divided by 2x plus 3 is minus y. And I'm left with this. And because it's multiplication, I have now 3 things multiplied together, but because it's multiplication, the brackets won't matter because it's just 3 things. So I actually can write this without the brackets even. The square brackets don't add anything. And then there I have this. And check your factors. Do you notice that of my factors, nothing can be factored further? There's no common factor anywhere. Okay, so we can say that this last line is fully factored. Okay, factor by grouping. Please practice. Good luck.